So first things first, how are you?
I am fine, thank you. I'm a little bit tired since I'm recouping from a very busy launch week in Malta for the new album and the launch here in Rotterdam as well. So it's been busy, but it's also been really, really great.
What has it been like the past couple of weeks, let's say, to the build up towards the album release and then it's finally out there? What does that to you mentally?
It's a bit of an emotional roller coaster. And I'm sure my therapist would confirm. But no, it's like you spend so much time working on a few songs and preparing them and listening to them over and over and over again that you don't really have any distance or perspective from what you're making anymore. And in the weeks leading up to the release, I find myself becoming incredibly hypercritical of what I'm doing. And I have days where I'm like, oh, wow, this is so good. And then days where I'm like, oh, my God, I cannot release this into the world. It's terrible. So it's one extreme to the next. But yeah, that's because I don't have any distance from it or any perspective. So once it's out there, once I'm connecting with my audience, my fans, my friends, and all the people that listen to the music, I start to see it from their eyes and ears, and I can appreciate it more. Or I can see it from a different perspective. And then, yeah, it's a bit more of a level opinion.
So we're still very close to the release. So have you let the songs go in a way now then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've let them go. And then I come back with these really surprising takes. Like my least favorite song on the album would end up being the one that moved someone the most. And I find that so exciting and so satisfying as well, because even as I'm writing the songs, I try to kind of let them have a life of their own. And, I try to do justice to the moment of that inspiration and let it just do its thing and try not to control it so much. And then afterwards, I'm like, okay, but I don't really know whether this is a good song or not. I kind of have to trust it. And then for someone to come back with that sort of opinion, it's very relieving as well. It's like just let it do its thing.
And I can imagine, was it even more so this time around because we are in a global pandemic and you're kind of so almost locked in physically and you're so involved with what you're doing in front of you because the world is slowing down outside. So was that even more difficult to kind of separate yourself from that?
Yeah. Well, I think the whole pandemic has affected people very differently depending on what their work is, also what their personalities are. It's really made some people more self-aware, I think, as well. A lot of people have said oh yeah, I've had my time in the pandemic, I found myself again and that sort of thing. I made music and stuff. And I'm definitely one of those people that really just went into the creative process and found myself there. But with the lack of live performances and so on and connecting with people as much, I think I didn't have that much feedback on the songs throughout the whole process. I really just kind of went into this bubble and yeah, I just kind of surrendered to the process, I guess. And yeah.
Well, what I find interesting then is because on this album you have definitely more of a band sound and you've incorporated all these elements that would obviously do well live. So was that in the back of your mind as you were writing this album, that you were, even though it was written in a time of isolation, it was written for a stage?
Yeah, I actually didn't think about that so much, to be honest, about what that would mean within the context of the pandemic. I knew I just wanted to make an album that had a bit of a different sound and had more of this sort of collective feeling to it. But maybe in hindsight, like, I could have said, like, oh no, festivals aren't going to happen. Maybe I shouldn't change it up. But I didn't think about that. I just thought about the music, actually.
What was the first song that you started writing that ended up on this album?
Ooh, good question. So there is one song on the album that I wrote actually when I was 19, and it sort of followed me throughout the years, and that is the song that I felt was the basis for the album conceptually, because it's about the butterfly effect, and it's about how in chaos theory every small action or thing can have a consequence and lead to bigger reactions. And this song is called Ladybird, and it was inspired by an encounter I had when I first moved to the Netherlands, with a nest of ladybirds living in my windowsill. And this apartment that I was in was like completely bare. There was a mattress and table, chair, and a big window overlooking a park. And this window actually was a bit broken, like it never closed properly. And I was feeling kind of blue, I guess. I was like 19 in a new country, away from everything I know, and embarking on this crazy adventure, leaving home and following music, I guess, and following intuition of some sort, I suppose. And when I found these ladybirds, I felt like, oh, this is a bit of color to all the bleakness. So I kind of took it as a sign of good luck, also because ladybirds are symbols of good fortune and love and everything beautiful, kind of. So I took that as my starting point, and instead of the butterfly effect, I'm calling it the ladybird effect. So whenever I see a ladybird, it's like a sign, like it's gonna be okay.
That's what I find that very interesting, because you talk about chaos theory and making decisions, especially big decisions, I suppose. Because you, throughout your life, and this comes back in a song like Vagabond as well, you have made some big decisions. You mentioned just now moving to another country when you're 18, 19, and just kind of pursuing something when you have no idea how it's going to turn out. What has guided you through those type of decisions?
Definitely some kind of intuition and trust in a natural flow of some kind. And I guess taking decisions with a foundation of love as well. So doing things with the most loving intention for myself and for others as well. And I suppose it's difficult because the older you get, I feel things are not so black and white as well. At the same time, it's like you can think of many more different outcomes and possibilities of your actions, so you don't really know what's right and what's wrong sometimes. But I think if you really, I guess, meditate on certain subjects and feelings, which is what I do through songs, you can arrive to some kind of resolve or answer, even if the answer is just another question.
What I find interesting as well is you mentioned love for yourself, and now is this something that comes back in the song? Not for me to say, where you also have to take care of yourself and not just try to fix the outside world, but focus on yourself.
Yeah. In that song, it really is catharsis. I was going through a terrible breakup where I had completely lost myself in the relationship at the time. And after it ended, I was completely naive, completely lost to this idea of love. And I guess it's what a lot of people do when they're in love. They don't see the red flags. And for me, it was a big learning curve, because I continuously blamed myself for everything that went wrong. I was not kind to myself at all. And that obviously has to do with a lot of different reasons, And I guess the process afterwards was an invitation to confront these things and to find myself again and to redefine myself, take more responsibility for myself as well, because it's not just like being so kind and being so sweet and loving. It's also being a bit irresponsible in a way, because you're not taking care of yourself at all. That's like an injustice to yourself. So yeah, I think in general, if you want to help others, you also need to be able to help yourself.
And I suppose because kind of finding yourself or your identity is I would guess, an ongoing process. It's not like one day you find it and then now you're fixed in a way.
You don't go on a wellness weekend and find yourself.
Exactly. But for, sorry, but for you, what was it that brought you back to closer to yourself then? What was it, delving into this album? Was it writing music? Was it playing music? What got you closer or back to where, back on the path that you needed to be on?
Well, it was taking a lot of time to myself to also grieve and to really understand my intentions and motivations and how I actually speak to myself. And definitely a way to sort through all these things is to play music and write songs, because when I'm writing songs, I have to search for the right words, so the most truthful words. And that's a long process of isolation. And that's why, like, the pandemic was not an unfamiliar state, I think, for a lot of artists. We're used to this kind of thing. But usually we have a choice in it. We can say, like, okay, now I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go out. I'm going to go meet some friends, just get back to some socializing. And during the pandemic, that was mostly gone. So it was a bit more difficult to take that distance then. But yeah, sometimes I feel like writing songs is sort of like slowly driving yourself insane a little bit, because at some point, like, you could keep going, and you can just rip apart reality as well if you want. But you need to, like, stop at some point, because you're going to lose yourself even more. So you find yourself, but then you could also just lose it again. So it's like a balance.
So the trick is then kind of knowing when you've gone far enough in a way.
Yeah, it's like taking care of a a child. Not that I've ever taken care of a child. I don't have children, but this is what I imagine it could be. It's like, okay, now it's time to have your dinner. Now you're going to go to bed and you're going to sleep as long as you need to.
And you mentioned the word catharsis. So has music always played this role for you? Like you said, it helps kind of, even when you were younger, did it always help kind of figuring out stuff?
I think it did, Robin, as cheesy as that may be. Like, music has always been a part of my life. And I remember a very significant moment when we were living in Germany. So I grew up partly in Germany, in Malta and Germany. So we were away from family quite a lot. And I remember my father playing some music on the stereo. And I heard one particular song and it brought me to tears. I was like 5 or something. And I felt this need to like go and hide as well and to cry to this music because I thought it was so beautiful, but also so moving. And it reminded me of home, of Malta, of my family. And I felt so sad that I couldn't be there. So it was like my first significant feeling of homesickness from such a young age. And it was this music that kind of that helped me to get in touch with my feelings somehow. I don't know whether it was the music that made me think of it or if it was like I was feeling it and then it put everything into place.
I have to ask, what song was it?
I really wish I remembered. I don't, but I think I don't know. If I remember, I'll tell you.
Okay. Well, what I find interesting then, and like you said, I believe you lived in Germany from age 2 to 9, kind of, and then you moved to the Netherlands at age 19, and the rest of the time you spent in Malta. So, but then you still are in Malta every now and again. But for instance, now with the album release, being able to do that in Malta and then do a couple of shows there, what does that mean to you then?
It makes me very emotional, definitely. Especially because I've written so many songs away from Malta with the perspective of being away and about developments within Malta. So then I'm always explaining to audiences around Europe, I'm telling them about Malta and what it means to me and that sort of thing. So then it's a different thing when I'm actually in Malta presenting these songs because everyone can understand a bit better from the perspective of being a Maltese person. And I say this in the context of a particular song, which is on the first album, which is about conservation of nature. And in Malta, it's in a really bad state because development is it's being overrun. The country is being overrun with development and it doesn't seem to have any end in sight. So all the natural beauty is slowly fading away. And someone said that the first signs of a society struggling is the lack of attention being given to nature. You start to see a decline in the natural world. So that's very evident. And it's not just in Malta. Like I'm feeling these things in the context of being a Maltese person, but it's happening everywhere, actually. And this is why the world is where it is at now. It's suffering, and we need to do something about it because it's too late, actually. But we still need to do something about it because it's just going to get worse and worse and worse for us. The planet's going to be okay, but For humans, no.
Yeah, when you just said that quote that you mentioned, I was thinking, well, that's the whole world, and nobody's or the whole world. Kind of Australia has struggles. The whole barrier reef is dying. You have fires in the United States and Australia. Everywhere things are not going the way they should. At least, like you said, for our survival or our sense of comfort. Do you think? Because, well, I don't know if this is the platform to ask that, but do you think there's something we can do about it, we as people? Because my view has always been, well, as long as the corporations don't change, there's nothing really we can do.
I definitely think that putting pressure on big corporations and so on will help for sure, because it's all about the supply chain and the demand that is being created by us, actually. So
Right.
that's why there's also there's a bigger demand for vegetarian food, for instance, and vegan food and all these alternatives. And slowly the market is changing to adapt to these demands. So I think definitely it's not a hopeless thing, but I think a lot of people start to become apathetic because they don't feel like they can make a change, like their voice isn't loud enough. But I don't think any person is too small to make a difference. And it's a very pessimistic thing to think the opposite. And it's not a ridiculously optimistic thing to think that you can make a difference. It's just a reality, like in the butterfly effect or the ladybird effect. It's one small action leading to bigger reactions. So, yeah.
Well, going back to the album then, and the butterfly effect, do you ever, how do you feel about kind of success? Because as you mentioned before, you were you said you make decisions based on or out of love, based on what's good for yourself or what's good for the world, in a sense. In terms of success, then do you have certain goals, or do you hope kind of an album like this can lead to a certain butterfly effect, or how do you perceive your art in that sense?
Well, a very interesting question. Well, making music is really just my form of self-expression, how I can bring ideas and thoughts across in a very pure way, I suppose. Like my way of being in this world is of an artistic nature for the most part, and that's just who I am. And whether it will lead to anything else, it probably will, as it has done before. But I'm also of the mind that it could stop at any moment as well. And if that were to happen, I would have to let go in some way. Like with inspiration, I'm always afraid I'll never be able to write a song again after I've made one, because it just feels so fleeting and so delicate. Like if I'm not of the right mind with the right intention, it will dissipate into thin air somehow. And I make music because it makes me happy. And it seems to make other people happy as well when I do have the chance to share it with people. When people do stumble across what I make. So I don't take it for granted, and I don't think it's super unique either. It's like there are so many different artists out there, so talented, so brilliant. I do feel like a small fish in a big sea, and that's okay.
What I find very interesting is what you said about songwriting, and I've heard this before from artists being afraid that once they made a record or a song and there's some time in between that they forget how to do it, or that the well has run dry in a sense. For you then, what for you, and especially looking at this album, because I wrote down Sky Palace Roof Terrace in Rotterdam. I don't know if that's a room in your house or that you have a place where you write. But what would be the ideal circumstances for you to write a song?
Ooh,
if there is any,
I don't think there's really.
Yeah.
I don't think there's an ideal place. It's more that I just have some quiet time. That's all. It's like being away from everything and everyone, even if that means there's just closed between me and the rest of the world. I think everything else is like an excuse to have an ideal condition or something. I don't believe in only being able to write in a certain way. It's like there are many writers over the years who have had to juggle all sorts of things, having families, and maybe being cramped into one room with their family. And then this writer would still find that time to write. So I think the ideal condition would be to be persistent. It's like a mental thing, really. Just persist. And going back to your previous question, sorry,
no,
Robin,
go ahead.
You were asking me about how I see the future, kind of like. I mean, I'm making music that I really like, and I hope it can affect people. But I also don't feel like I'm trying to change the world or anything. I'm not trying to make an album that's gonna change the world. If it does do that, that's kind of cool, and hopefully it's for the better.
Fair enough. Well, final question then. You mentioned persistence. What is as a songwriter, because I've asked people this before. I don't know if it's a good question, but are you looking for the perfect song then, or what is it that you're looking for in that songwriting, and why are you so in a way persistent in writing songs?
There's definitely this element of ambition to write better songs, for sure. I want to be the best version of myself that I can be, the best artist that I can be. Otherwise, I'm terrified of regret for not having gone after that burning feeling inside to create. So I'm just trying to stay true to that feeling as much as possible. And for I know I'm going to have regrets anyway, but I want to know that I at least tried, that I did the best I could for this artist within me that wants to, enjoy the world as much as possible as well, because I get so much joy from making music and writing songs.
Alexandra, may I thank you for your time?
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you so much.
It was really lovely.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.